Have you got rabbits at your house, Councillor Ladwig, or?
Yes, I know.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they're-
I didn't respond to your text the other day.
No.
They've established themselves as kind of free range. They don't leave our
Oh,
yard.
really?
It's cool. Yeah, they've been like that for over a year now.
Yeah, we do see them in the front yard every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We've realized we think they like to go to the front yard to people watch. They like to be around people, and so
watching people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. It is. I do have 3 o'clock, so we'll start the meeting and welcome everybody to the Committee of the Whole for June 7, 2022 of the town of Gibsons. And we are holding this meeting electronically, and once again, honored to be on this traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I'll call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock and ask for approval of the agenda. Councillor Kroll, Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And ask as well for a motion to receive all reports and presentations on the agenda. Councillor Ladwig, Councillor Lumley, all in favor? Thank you very much. Now we are going to receive a presentation that we've been anxiously awaiting since at least last year. And this is going to be the delegation from Simon Wing, the Senior Hydrologist for Waterline Resources. And this is relating to our aquifer mapping project. And just a note that the report itself will be available after the meeting, and I understand it'll be available also on our website. But we will go as soon as we have Mr. Wing with us, and there's Mr. Wing now coming in.
Hey, good afternoon.
Simon, welcome.
Welcome. I just got upgraded here to my status.
There you are. Yeah. And I should say as well that I understand there's a number of people, including the Sunshine Coast Regional District representatives attending this meeting, and to get to gain the report, receive your report, and understanding of the water situation. So
great.
Okay, so and
you guys can see my. You guys can see. Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
And you can hear me okay as well?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Yeah, as introduced, my name is Simon Wing, and I'm a hydrogeologist with Waterline. And today I was asked to come present a kind of a short, hopefully shorter, concise presentation here on this aquifer mapping study that we just completed for the Gibson aquifer. And yeah, I hope to kind of give some context of the results of the study, and then also maybe just give some highlights of the Gibson aquifer, or the aquifer that's mapped by the province as aquifer 560, and kind of the setting that we're in near the town here. So I'm just going to move this out of the way here quick. Just going to go over here. But yeah, so for those who been living here a long time, maybe know the history, or maybe are new to the area, I thought I'd throw in some background information just to give you some context of what's gone on over the years. So starting in 2009, there was some interest in kind of assessing the aquifer, the water source that supplies, as I stated here, 70% at the time of the water to the town. At the time, also in 2009, 30% of the water was coming from the SCRD Chapman system. So yeah, in 2009, aquifer, our Waterline, was sort of tasked to help with this study. The study was completed in 2013. And since 2013, there's been ongoing groundwater monitoring programs at the town. In 2015, with the OCP update, the official community plan, the town included a lot of good language around protection of the aquifer and the water source. They included some DPA, some development permit area guidelines and bylaws to help, with that and kind of give some teeth to the protection of the water system. Also in the province at the same time, the Water Sustainability Act was being updated. It previously only dealt with surface water. And in 2016, they added the licensing of groundwater as well. And the town, of course, applied for their license in 2018 for existing use. So all the water that they had already been using prior to 2016, and they received that license quite quickly. Since that time, through trying to create more points of diversion and help with development at the town, they drilled 2 more wells, and they've also applied for a new license there too. And then most recently in 2020, I guess I wanted to point out that now the town is completely on aquifer water. So they're no longer getting water from the SCRD. There's instances where they're sharing of water, specifically last year during the heat dome, but generally speaking, they're all on groundwater now. And then in 2021, as the mayor indicated, you know, this study was commissioned, and in 2022 we finished the study. So a bit more background. I'll keep on going on the background game here. Out of the 2013 studies, to give you some more context, there was quite a few recommendations that were provided by Waterline, and at the time also I should indicate that my former coworker Jessica Doyle, who now works for the province, was completing her master's thesis on the project. So she had a lot of input here as well. But there's a lot of recommendations. As you can see, there was different timelines, short-term and long-term. And in 2022, I'm happy to report that a lot of these recommendations have been completed around aquifer management, and more investigations. You know, some of them are ongoing. Monitoring, as I mentioned before, is ongoing. Installation of monitoring wells. And, you know, maybe the only incomplete one that's being addressed currently is kind of the use and management of some of this extra water from this artesian flow condition, which I'll get into a bit more detail here. And then finally at the bottom here, one of the long-term goals, you know, greater than 5 years, was to redo or update this model, which was part of this project. So quick overview. So the objectives. So for today's meeting, I just wanted to kind of, like I said, give you a context of the study results and of the aquifer or the groundwater conditions at the town. And then the study itself, the objectives were to kind of integrate new data that had been collected since 2013, and then reassess and recalibrate all the models, the conceptual model of the aquifer itself, and then the water use models that I'll get into as well. And you can see some of the names here. So we've updated the 3D model with the geological information, calibrated the groundwater flow model, which gives us information on the groundwater use. So a little bit of background for those who might not know as much about groundwater. I got 2 slides here. Won't go into too much detail, but you know, the water cycle and aquifer types along the Sunshine Coast, you have 3 types. You have fractured bedrock aquifers, which are kind of deeper aquifers where you have water that's contained in the fracture systems. And then you have 2 types of what we call unconsolidated, so sands and gravels and silts and clays that create 2 types of aquifers. You have an unconfined aquifer, which is near surface, and you have a confined aquifer, which is confined by a more or less permeable layer. So in this case, in this schematic from the regional district of Nanaimo, they have a silty layer. So that's kind of the same system that we have at the town of Gibsons. And of course, our interest in this discussion is Aquifer 560, or locally referred to as the Gibsons Aquifer. Really quickly with the water cycle, I kind of thought this was a great kind of schematic because it kind of helps you understand how the water is recharged into the aquifer. So you're maybe asking yourself, how does water get into a confined aquifer? And so in some cases where precipitation falls, as you can imagine, Mount Alpha Stone, higher elevations, it can get through the fractures and into the into the confined aquifer. And where this confining unit is thin, you can also get infiltration, as I've indicated here, through these sediments that can sometimes get into the confined portion. And this takes a long time. It's not quick. As I indicated with Jessica Doyle there, she did her master's thesis, and we didn't redo any groundwater chemistry work, but I can say that in the 2013 study, they did do age dating of the water, and they found that the water ranges between 8 years and 80 years, depending on the depth. So as you can imagine, it takes some time for the water to infiltrate or recharge into the aquifer, but in geological time, that's quite quick. So now if we focus on the confined aquifer 560, and we kind of go into a bit more detail of what kind of aquifer that is. So as many of you may know or might not know, the aquifer is an artesian aquifer. If you've been down in Lower Gibsons, the topography changes, it's quite steep, and you have a confining unit, as we'll get into, and that confining unit is providing a barrier for this pressurized groundwater system. So in Lower Gibsons, actually the aquifer is flowing artesian, where the water level is in theory above ground level, sorry. And in middle Gibsons and upper Gibsons, that water level, as would be here, would be below ground, so it's not flowing. But if you were to go to some of the town wells and lower Gibsons and maybe open the valve, the water would pressurize and come to surface, as indicated by this water level here. So I guess I just wanted to show this kind of as an idea of the plumbing system. Again, you have recharge at higher elevations, and this is only a schematic. This isn't exactly how the water gets in, but as you can imagine, water enters the aquifer and gravity driven down towards the ocean, and you have this system of an artesian aquifer. So as I mentioned before, part of the study was to update the geological model. So I think the big thing here to get a sense of is through the 2013 model and all the data that's been collected since 2013, we were able to use 423 data points, and those data points included wells, which are the red, geophysical data, which is the blue points, and then field observations, which are the green. And those data points were used to calibrate this geological model. As I've indicated here, there's these inputs. So, at surface, we're able to walk around and you can see, Gospel Rock area where you have bedrock exposed at surface. You can obviously walk around up the creeks and you can see the material exposed along the steep portions of the creeks. And also we had to do drilling. Obviously, there's a lot of drilling going on by the town, by the SCRD, and by private citizens or residents that are outside of the town. So a lot of that information is public and we're able to use it in our model. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, with the groundwater monitoring program, we're able to collect a lot of data, and that data, such as groundwater levels, is used in understanding the system, the groundwater system. So I'm going to break it down into the different components of the geology real quick. I'll go through them not too quick, but try to give you a sense from bottom up. So from bedrock to surface, all the different units. So in our model, the 3D model using Leapfrog, we're able to take all those data points, specifically the drilling locations where there's information on bedrock, and come up with this kind of model area. So this is the study area that was used in 2013, and we've just updated it with new data. You can see maybe the takeaway from this is that, and maybe it's hard to tell, but there are irregularities in the bedrock. The bedrock isn't just smooth and flat. Obviously, as I indicated down near the shore, you got bedrock highs. There's bedrock highs and lows throughout the system. And as I kind of maybe give you a sense of location, there's Soames Creek, Gibson, Sharman, and Chester. Across this area, it's quite variable, the bedrock. So these low areas, what they do is they allow for the accumulation of this orange colored material, which is the aquifer material. So that's typically sands and gravels. And we call it, there's various names, but the pre-Vachon is the name that's been given to it. And that's referred to as aquifer 560. So as you can see here, the general outline of the aquifer based on the data that we had available kind of gives you a sense of where that's kind of distributed. And then because this is a confined aquifer, as we mentioned in one of the first slides, there's a confining unit called an aquitar that covers the whole area. And so this is the green, and that's called the Vachon till. So a till is typically a pretty low permeable material, and it blankets the area. You can see maybe here, there's a little bit of what's it called, orange popping up over here, where in Chester Creek, the creek in size is quite deep. So that kind of gives you a sense of maybe of the recharge, and I'll get into that a bit later, and how far up the slope that goes. And then one more thing on top of this, we have the Capilano Formation, which is another, and might not be of use now, but there's different sequences of glaciation and deposition from different environments that deposit this. So the most recent deposition, or one of the most recent depositions, is the Capilano. And that forms a shallow, unconfined aquifer that's not generally used for any groundwater supply. Some people do have wells in the Capilano, but the town does not. They're targeted that deeper zone. And the Capilano Formation also provides a secondary cap. It's almost like an extension of the green. So that's kind of the idea of the material that's deposited from the bedrock to surface. And people might have seen this before, but this is kind of a cross section we call it a cross section through a slice through the ground, or a slice through these units to kind of give you a sense of how it all stacks up. And as I mentioned here, you can see that here's the aquifer. We have the caps on top, and then below we have the bedrock. I can take a bunch of questions after, but you can kind of see here that the water level pops above surface. So as indicated, this artesian condition, the water table is higher than groundwater or higher than ground surface, sorry, in lower Gibsons, and therefore there's that flowing artesian condition. So one of the takeaways from the updated model, which has been discussed and maybe is a bit more definitive now with some more data, is how when we look at the Aquifer 560, which is mapped by the province as one unit, how it does have different areas of this larger aquifer. So I'm calling them lobes here, or channels, where the sediment is thicker and is more permeable, and where it may be discontinuous across the area, the full extent of the area. And this is quite important when we're understanding how the different parts or the different areas where we have different wells, different communities using water, and how those wells interact. So what I've done here is I've tried to give a generalized sense based on the water level data that we have from the town and from the SOM, so the Church Road well, and also from the Elphinstone wells, that it's all publicly available from the SCRD's website, how these areas kind of map a bit different. So again, I've indicated here, there's the Elphinstone lobe, the Gibson lobe, which is right in the middle here, underneath, primarily underneath the town. And then there's the Somes lobe. And I also added this fourth circle here, kind of just to tie it all together. So what's the common denominator between all three of these lobes is the recharge area. So again, at higher elevations in the watersheds, where precipitation is falling and moving its way towards the ocean, these areas are kind of a shared area, I'm calling them, where we have groundwater or recharge to the groundwater systems. Okay, sorry, excuse me. Okay, so a last piece to the discussion of the aquifer mapping and the conceptual model. It might be jumping ahead a bit, but it also gives context to how we've conceptualized these lobes. So in taking that data and putting it into our 3D software, we're also able to kind of track where the groundwater from the town wells is coming from using particle tracking. So we were able to put a particle by the well and simulate where the water would come from based on the thickness of the material and how permeable and transmissive the material is. And the takeaway from this slide is that you can kind of see the town has several wells. And again, town well 6 and town well 5 are new wells. They're not pumping, but we were able to simulate based on the data we have where the water would come from. And you can kind of get a sense that the water that the town is supplying to the residents is coming from a pretty narrow portion of the aquifer, which we call the Gibsons aquifer, the Gibson lobe, higher elevation to lower elevation. And I'm sure the same thing could be projected if you had the data for the Somes wells and the Elphinstone wells over in the Marianne area. So kind of giving a sense again of how it's a bit discontinuous across the area and how it's kind of separated. So taking all this data for the model from the formations of the layers, we're able to then, like I said, take that data and put it into a numerical model that helps us understand groundwater use. So we have the physical constraints of the aquifer, and now we're able to model or simulate different types of water use scenarios and get a sense of the risk from pumping this water. So similar to 2013, we used a variety of population growth estimates. We also used a variety of water per capita, and these numbers are quite founded. So with the metering that's been going on at the town's been able to track water use as a long-term average and as a current use. So as you can see, a lot of water saving measures have been going on to reduce that number by quite a bit, actually. And then also with our groundwater use scenarios, we're able to assess some climate change variables. Pretty crude. We're taking percentages and reducing the recharge to come up with a change in effect. And so the three things that we manipulated was decrease in rainfall. It might not seem like we're decreasing in rainfall on an annual basis, but the time at which the water is hitting the ground, we've reduced that to try to get a sense of how that would affect the water use. And then decreasing the snow accumulation, and then trying to do an increase in sea level rise to limit the amount of water we have to pump from. And then we assessed, like I said, some risks. So we had a low, moderate, and high risks. The takeaway here is the 70% of the available drawdown. So that's 70% of the available water in the well is the recommendation of how much pumping you should do. You should not exceed 70% of the available drawdown. You should leave yourself 30% for climate change and such. So what we said is if the wells are being operated above 70%, everything is good, low risk. If for some reason that dips below 70%, which is not the end of the world, but it's not recommended. There's times of the year or times of the day where they do, but generally speaking, it's above. That would be a moderate risk. And then a high risk is if the water level did drop in the wells below sea level. So as you can imagine, in Lower Gibsons, we're right against the ocean. So if water levels were to drop below the ocean, it would be problematic because at that point you could be influencing seawater the other way towards the wells. And that's quite a big risk and can happen when there's over pumping. And we've seen that in other areas. So the results, and maybe this is more important to everyone else than the background, but so again, the software we use was called ModFlow. It's a numerical model. So it's a computer simulated model. And I've indicated here 3 scenarios that we did. And in each scenario here are the inputs. So the different populations, the different per capita uses, and then the volume that would be required to supply these populations, and then the risk. So scenario 1 is simply stating what would be the case in 2026 if we had the average, the long-term use demand, and we're trying to achieve the population that we expect, and that volume of water that would be pumped daily, and then the risk is low. And then if we were to go to a situation where we have full build out, so 10,000 residents, which based on a pretty accelerated population growth would be 2050. So in 28 years, at a lower use, the current use, we would need 4,000 meters cubed. So 1 meter cube is 1,000 liters, and still the risk would be low. But if we were to pump up, if we were to do the same scenario, but change to a higher demand, the long-term demand, we would then encounter a moderate risk. And so I added a bullet point here for everyone. The moderate risk is suggesting that, yes, we would be keeping the water levels below that 70%, but above sea level, which is not ideal. It's not the end of the world, but it would require some manipulation of the rates. And how I think we could, and there's much more detail in the report, but how we could potentially achieve this is by relying more on the well, the town well 6, which is not in operation, that is further inland, away from the ocean, that's tested at a pretty high rate. So this rate here was tested, and it could produce more water given the results that we found from the test back in 2020. So we could have some more reliance on town well 6, have less reliance on the wells near the ocean, and we could probably move this towards a low risk as well. So this is all great news. We're taking data that we've been collecting, we're calibrating a model, we're running various scenarios, and we're kind of producing some different risk levels here. So I guess I'm getting towards the end here, so don't talk too much more, is that, what is some of the outcomes of the report? Well, obviously the outcomes of the study and the report are, what can the aquifer yield as far as supply for future development? Are we causing any effects to the aquifer? And really what needs to be done in the future to help, keep good tabs on what's going on. So what I wanted to reiterate here is, the common recharge area is really an important question and an important topic for everyone maybe on the call, as we get a lot of questions about development and how can we make sure that this water supply is sustainable. So one of the big takeaways is understanding or doing some more investigations in that upper area, kind of on the town boundary, as to what's happening in these recharge areas. And for the town, that interest might be in the Sharman Creek, Shasta Creek, and part of that Gibson Creek area, where the capture zone, those particle tracking is coming from. And vice versa for the SCRD, they'd have the same idea. They'd have areas outside in their area they'd like to protect as well. Other things that come up that are discussionary that the town is doing and they are always reviewing when they have a new development is the DPA 9, the Developed Permit Area 9. So land developers who are doing work in the town, specifically in Lower Gibsons, because that aquifer is artesian, it's pressurized, and it's flowing, you want to make sure that anybody who's doing work down there doesn't breach the surface or breach the aquifer and cause a flowing condition where you could lose control of that pressure and therefore, dewater the aquifer indirectly. So that's kind of being done by protection through DPA. Sorry about this, gonna end this. And then water conservation efforts. So like I indicated, the town is conserving water through the reduce numbers, as from 523 liters to 404. But one other thing they could potentially investigate is how to capture some of this artesian flow that does flow to storm when they're not pumping the wells. And like I said, that's kind of a discussion that's happening right now. So the study conclusions, again, we feel, and as discussed with the town, the system or the water system should be managed jointly. I know there's a lot of different parties and groups involved. The province, is obviously has more of a hierarchical overview of it and licensing, but I think it needs to be managed, jointly so that there's proper protection and sustainability. Again, one of the things that we've kind of concluded and been a bit more definitive with is these aquifer lobes, these channelized areas that are kind of discontinuous from each other across the study area, but that do share that recharge area where the water is originating from. As indicated in a few slides before, we're seeing really good results as far as water availability, sustainable water that's there for population growth. This 10,000 people, it obviously could change. It could take longer to reach that number or shorter, but there is some good evidence to suggest that the water is available given the current use. And then as a final comment or as a final bullet, to reach that amount of water for the town to be able to use that water that's licensed, they would need an additional volume in addition to the existing license and the new use license that's being reviewed at this volume. So there is still some work to be done to obtain those licenses or that extra license to supply potential full population growth. And again, maybe as a reiteration again, continuing engagement with all parties, stakeholders, the continuation of the groundwater monitoring and all the good stuff that's been in place to date through the OCP for protection of the aquifer. And I list a policy here specifically that I reference quite frequently, talking about, the town's commitment to making sure that they are promoting efficient water use. Excuse me, again, more investigations in the upper reaches where the recharge is happening to kind of pinpoint maybe there's specific areas that are, more definitive for recharge. It's all underground, so it's hard to know exactly, but, a bit more detail and well drilling and monitoring it would always be useful. And I know the province has installed a few wells kind of outside of the study area. They've installed one well that's outside, but more wells I think is required across that upper area. And then again, to continue the protection of that cap that protects the aquifer in Lower Gibsons, we've also suggested, continuing to put in a few more wells, specifically in Lower Gibsons, to help characterize that confining unit and that interaction potentially with surface water, which is a big thing in licensing groundwater. So yeah, I hope I was informative, and thanks. And if you have any questions, I'm here to help or here to answer them. So
Simon,
yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I'll let you leave your screen up there just in case any members
Sure,
of council
yeah.
want to go back to any particular slides, but thank you for very informative. Now, this is obviously much of a summary of your report, and the report I'm sure will be very interesting when we get a chance to read it. If I could start the questions, and a couple of them that come to mind for me are the idea of first of all, the partnership with the SCRD and the town of Gibson. I think we need to also include the Squamish Nation in that conversation.
For sure, yeah.
They have the Sheckwell Preserve, of course, and all, but also very important to this area, their role. And so
Yeah.
that hopefully we'll be able to investigate that. And is there any, like you have the rings on a tree and you can go back in history and you can take a look at what happened relative to events in the life of that tree, including climate. And if somebody who's knowledgeable studies that, is it possible that some of the events that we see now occurring with climate change, like the heat dome, could impact us not this year, but 10 years from now or 20 years from now?
Yeah, I would say, so the province does do a good job. They have the provincial groundwater observation well network, and some of the wells that they have go back to like the 80s, like 83, or I think is one of the latest ones or the earliest ones.
Yeah.
And they're able to assign trends, upward trends, downward trends, stable trends. And so it is, and depending on the aquifer, so if you have an unconfined aquifer, that's the shallow one, those water levels respond directly to precipitation and as you can imagine, it's really close to ground surface. So if there's less precipitation, it's hot, the water level reduces. It's a bit more challenging with the confined aquifer because it is confined and given the ages, if you can imagine, the age is 80 years for some of the deeper groundwater, maybe 30 in the middle and 8 at the shallow portion. So with the monitoring system that you have in place, we can go back to 2013, but it's a little hard to pinpoint drastic changes in recharge or climate change affected conditions. The trend currently in the Gibsons aquifer where the town's monitoring is an increasing trend. So suggesting that all the water, saving measures that you've been implementing is allowing the aquifer to increase, the water levels getting higher despite the use of the aquifer. So that's a positive thing. But as far as pinpointing specific events, it is a bit challenging given the record that we have currently. Yeah. But you're on the right track of thinking it's possible that you could potentially see some, hopefully not, but major change in recharge due to some climate effect.
Again, a final question from me. Did your report make any observation on the impact or risk of activities that are occurring on top of the aquifer, both in the regional area and in the town?
So on an annual basis, we do take, and so this is kind of a pre-warning, we do take samples every year of various monitoring locations across the town and kind of on the outskirts of the town and from the town wells, the pumping wells themselves. And the quality has consistently been the same, suggesting that whatever land use practices are going on are not affecting, it's not directly impacting the water quality. But it like I said, there's that lag time. So to suggest that just by chance that the logging or whatever is happening, that's changing the water volumes or that, is unknown. I mean, you could understand that by creating impermeable surfaces across the whole area might reduce the amount of recharge through infiltration, which is one mechanism. But because 8 years sounds long, but not really, we have to assume the water's getting in pretty quick. So those areas haven't been affected by all means. If the study now has been since 2013, we're approaching 10 years, we're seeing increases in water levels. I don't think we've seen anything that would suggest development or land use changes is affecting the volume. Yeah.
Thank you, Simon. I'll go to council now for questions. Councillor Lumley.
Thank you. And thanks, Simon, for the report. I just wanted to stay on the climate change thing because I know nothing about how that's going to affect anything. Maybe none of us do, but I know that like when you said you kind of made a remark based on the reduction of rainfall, but like more recently, like all these places have been getting record rainfalls. 120-year records falling. And I know those are in short periods of time, like they measure things by day. So when you have these rainfalls that, you have these 3 days of record rainfalls, does, like, is there a, I guess you can't tell, but does a lot of that water just end up not even getting to the aquifer? Does it all slough off on one of the first or two levels of this? That was kind of like what I was curious about.
Yeah. The report we'll talk about this. And I mean, we've used the Gower Point climate station, which is lower elevation, so not higher elevation, but you're totally on the right track. So my understanding or my interpretation is that yes, you're getting by volume, annual volume in millimeters, a higher volume annually, but you're not able to give it the time to infiltrate, and the infiltration properties of the soils, like if you can imagine a velocity or a speed, it's basically driven by the permeability, how much space and how much speed can the water get down. It's slow. So even if you're dumping a lot of water in a short period of time, and by annual volumes, you're receiving more per annual, calendar year, that water is just reporting to the ocean. It's getting into the creeks, it's going overland, and then you've lost that ability to recharge. So what we're saying is in the recharge period in the report, I forget the numbers exactly, but I think you're receiving, 50% more recharge in the wet season, but that's not getting in. By comparison, you're receiving 29% less recharge in the summer. So the summers are longer and drier. So in an ideal world, you get a little precipitation every day in the mornings or something, right? Something like Hawaii, and then you would be good. But unfortunately, yeah, you're right. It's not making its way down there fast enough, and therefore it's not. That's the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Ledwig.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Simon. That was really informative. I was just kind of curious about the same slide that Councillor Lumley just brought up. I was wondering what you based those climate change considerations on. You said you used a term like it was a credible source of some sort, but what exactly is that? The climate change considerations being the 15% reduction in rainfall or the 30% decrease in accumulation? Like, where do those numbers come from?
Right. And I can send this out after too. So the 2013 report, Jessica Doyle and Waterline, so my boss, Darren David, they cited at the time, I won't pretend, I won't try to pretend I know this, different climate scenarios, Pacific decade oscillation, to try to give a range of potential changes in the future for rainfall. The study that they cite goes both ways, that there's going to be more or less. And so in reducing the rainfall, the 15% is kind of is the most conservative. So the potential highest change, similarly with snow accumulation. I can say that for certainty that, they also reference another paper for changes in sea level due to glacier melts and sea level rise. So 30% is expected actually in the lower mainland. And this might have changed obviously since then, but we kind of reuse these numbers. So what we ended up doing is we ended up being even more conservative and assuming 1 meter to apply to the amount of water available for pumping. So there are citations for these, and I've discussed this with the town. I mean, there's definitely more robust ways to model climate change, but generally speaking, we were able to reduce the amount of water getting into the aquifer through these changes to suggest what could be the future. So there is definitely some information behind these numbers.
Yeah, I assume there would be, but so these are water lines scenarios, not like Environment Canada's or like more of a regional estimate. This is more
correct. Yeah. Right. So I mean, I might be behind at times. I'm sure there's someone on the call who's going to be way more informative on this. That maybe Environment Canada has done a recent study that they are using X number and X number, but these are waterline numbers that have been interpreted from cited reports. So kind of trying to represent the current conditions in the Gibsons area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then one last quick question. What do you guys recommend as far as the frequency for monitoring this, like doing exactly the study you just did now? How often should that be repeated? Like once a year, once every 3 years, once every 5 years?
So yeah, the town is doing annual reporting of just collecting. So we have these instruments called pressure transducers that are instrumented in the wells, and those give a record of the water levels. And then we're taking manual measurements and then sampling the quality of the water on an annual basis. There's discussions of potentially reporting volumes and levels maybe more frequently in the year with one report at the end of the year. But this style of groundwater study update is a long-term ask, and because you need some more data to calibrate the model.
Right.
So I think it was mentioned in the 2013 report, 10 years. So it's almost been 10 years since we've done it, or since Waterline's been involved in this part. So I'd say it's more greater than 5 years, around 10 years. You'd want to maybe review your scenarios to see that the data is giving you good agreement with what you're observing on site.
I'd cut it in the middle. I'd say 7.
And sure, 7.5, yeah. I don't think there's a specific date in the OCP, but it does say long-term, and maybe Manny or someone at the town would know this more, but it does, there's a section there about monitoring and it's more of a long-term, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Simon, for the presentation. Very instructive. My question, it's on the lines of climate change too. So when I see the scenario, your calculations based on a scenario of 15% decrease in rainfall and 30% decrease in snow accumulation, somehow I'm considering this a not too bad scenario, let's say, kind of a decent scenario. However, if we go to a bad scenario due to, for example, deforestation or fire or excessive heat or disease in our forest on the recharge area, and suddenly we don't have, even if we have the rainfall, but we might not have the absorption, the infiltration, or the rainfall, like Councilor Lumley was asking. We have an excess of rainfall, but it's too strong, so it's not percolating. And then the snow, it's not 30% decrease, it goes to 50. I almost feel that we are, our consumption, when we maximize population at 10,000 is low risk based on a good, decent scenario of climate change. What happens if we go to an extreme scenario? And that to me is my concern.
Right. I guess maybe, and I also should clarify because the report is a bit more detailed, but for each of these scenarios, we ran a scenario with no climate change. Then we only assessed the rainfall. Then we assessed another. So let's say there's 3 scenarios. Each scenario has 3 permutations of each one to kind of give a sense on what does decrease in rainfall look like versus snow accumulation. But to answer your question, I mean, these are all questions, unfortunately, and I think that, you know, with it being confined aquifer, with the age of the water, with the understanding that it's deep and that it's not directly recharged, you know, it's not as if when tomorrow the rain stops and then the water level drops. The monitoring program, at least I could say that the monitoring, performance monitoring, is your best guide to help you forewarn. So let's say like next year we start to see decreasing trends and that continues for 1 or 2 more years. I think that's where the alarms go up and say, okay, well, maybe we have to look at what's happened in the climate maybe, or has the consumption gone up? But you know, all of these models are just models. They're not, you know, no model, all models, or whatever the saying is, none of them are that great. They kind of try to give you context. But yeah, I think the monitoring is where the town has a leg up, in that they have this data since 2013 and they're continuing to collect the data to feed back in and give forewarning. But yeah, it would be, I couldn't speculate that if 50% or 60%, I mean, it would definitely reduce the amount of available water to pump in a model scenario. And how likely is that? At this point, the data suggests the aquifer is actually increasing its levels due to reduced consumption from by 23%. So if you know, the people are using less water year over year, the water level is increasing. So maybe that's not the answer you wanted, but yeah, it's hard to predict that.
Yeah, I think my concern is in the next 10 years, we're still, reasonable, but now we are build out our town. And, but then the situation changed. So I'm not sure if I'm reading correctly, but 15% decrease and 30% decrease in snow accumulation does not look like the worst scenario, right? The worst scenario in climate change. I might be wrong, but it seems like a reasonable scenario if everything goes like in moderate ways. But my concern is, what about if it doesn't go moderate, it goes extreme in the next 10 years? And now we have a town build, like a build out of 10,000 people. It's going to be, and on top of that, how does the SCRD use it can influence? I understand that the license is given by the province, so they have all the calculations, but still, now they're using water from the aquifer. So how this could impact the availability of.
And so the one quick question or one comment for the first part of your question. So this 70% available drawdown. So in the report, you'll also see, so even under these conditions, which maybe we can agree or not the worst case scenario, but a condition that we've tried to assess based on the literature that we had, the available head is still quite above 70%. So suggesting that you're not using even 70%, you're using 60% or 50%. So there's still room to go in this scenario here. That might, but yeah, again, we won't know until, I guess slowly but surely we're monitoring this. And yeah, second part of your question, the idea that the aquifer 560, the provincially mapped aquifer, has different lobes and has a common discharge area, as you can imagine, near the ocean. Here, let me just go to that slide. So the Soames well or the Church Road well is here, and then Elphinstone, they have a couple wells over here. These are all at the discharge portion of the aquifer. So how their capture zone is delineated here, it's unknown because there's not much drilling data here to distinguish where the thickness of the aquifer continues to, hence the idea of, more investigation in the recharge area. But yeah, the province has done a water budget analysis and kind of tried to assess how much water in and out. And I won't speak for the province to say how they've assigned licenses. I can be honest to say that the licenses are assigned based on beneficial use. And as we know, people need water. So the beneficial use, if there's a demand and there's a need, I think that definitely has a factor in assessing license approval. But on the technical perspective, I think that's more of a question, unfortunately, for them to ask, what would be the difference or how are they considered both systems? I mean, as far as I'm aware, this report this modeling is maybe the only modeling that's been done for this area. So at the time in 2013 and then updated now. So,
okay.
So yeah, I think the town has intention to share the data with the FLNRO or the province. So maybe there's consideration there for review or discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish, and thank you, Simon. I'm sure we're in for some interesting reading. What I was just wanted to inquire, with your taking into consideration sea level rise, and from different reports that have come in from varying sources, it seems to be happening faster than was originally anticipated. So, you made reference that we are, the security within our water system is to our advantage, retreating, as it were, to higher ground to create wells. But I'm just wondering, again, sort of almost going to Councillor Andretti's comments, things seem to be happening much faster than we're anticipating. So in your modeling, were you taking just sort of what's current sea level rise? Were you taking any potential extremes, or was it just sort of a gradual curve?
Yeah, so when we, under the base case scenario, without assuming the sea level rise, which then reduces the available drawdown, That's based on 2021, last year's annual report that where we collected water level data. So what is the current groundwater level, geodetically referenced at the wells versus what's the mean sea level elevation? How much water available is there above that elevation? And then taking the most extreme condition by, let's say, assuming that sea level rises by 1 meter, and then reducing that available drawdown, and then therefore reducing the amount of pumping you could do theoretically without, reaching a high or moderate risk. So I think we've covered today's conditions, and then we've converted or at least assessed the worst case condition. If in fact the sea level increases by 1 meter and therefore the available drawdown in the wells decreases proportionally. So that makes sense, or if that's maybe not answering your question.
And just to follow up, if I may, Mayor Beamish, you made reference to, if there were to be a breach in the aquitard in the area, particularly along the shoreline where it's at its most vulnerable. So I'm assuming you would get a sort of freshwater purging out of the aquifer, allowing the sea water pressure to infiltrate below ground. But once the salt water reached the breach point, just the dynamics there, because of different densities and pressure and one thing and another, would
yeah, if I might have missed that last part, but yeah, so there is the province also has discussion on this saltwater freshwater boundary. We can say that the aquifer, because of drilling done by DFO for the pier and works that's been done in the harbor, that the aquifer extends into the harbor. It's capped. It's confined. There's a pressure of the aquifer has a pressure under the ocean, if you will, past the shoreline. But so if you were to, and there's sightings of this. So if anybody is familiar with Kerrisdale area in Vancouver, they were doing a drilling there where they were putting a geothermal, and they dug into the aquifer, and they had an artesian blowout, and it cost X amount of dollars to repair. But yeah, the idea being that, you might not lose all the water, but you could potentially, move that boundary inland, or change that boundary, that pressure gradient between the two water types or just, I don't know, this sounds catastrophic, but dewater the aquifer. But yeah, you could, or induce contamination. So there is, and depending on the type of breach, if you've imagined, if you're just digging with an excavator, you could create a pretty big hole that would be hard to fix. So yeah, you're on the right track as to what might happen when you do that. If you breach the cap, uncontrolled, that is. You can definitely breach it, but you have to make sure you're able to contain that pressure.
Okay,
thank you. Sorry, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm sure the council is going to have a lot more questions once they receive and read the full report. And I think we'll have to schedule another opportunity to have that discussion. And before I turn it over to our CAO, can I just ask you to go back to either the Capilano Formation or the Vashon Till Formation slide?
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. And I just wanted to point out to council to have a look at and that is the extent of the Chester tributary as it comes through the corner of the town. That feeds a long way up Mount Elphinstone, and you can see there it's got more than one tributary. So when there's a major storm event, there's a lot of water going to come down that tributary, and we've seen the impact of that. So that it's coming from a long way, and it's coming from a high elevation, and it is the question as to whether it is being, when it goes into one single line after it passes through the corner of the town and heads to Chester Creek, how well that is being maintained and managed through that line is one thing we need to look at. So, CAO, some follow up with you. And you can stop sharing now. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Through you, Ms. Mayor, thank you. And let me first start by, thanking Simon and his team at Waterline. Gives us a fair amount of comfort to have capacity such as they provide to help us manage this asset. And I think the town has done a decent job over the last few years with the relatively limited resources, but it's certainly good to see the results that we're seeing, and I appreciate council's question and interest too. The report is very informative and will answer a lot of the questions you have, I'm sure. Just a couple of things as terms of a follow-up. Staff will work on a report, go through this, meet with Simon and others, and we'll come back in a few weeks with a report on how we're going to implement some of these recommendations, or all these recommendations. I'm all happy to report that for over the last couple of days, we've been establishing contact with the Ministry of Forests and have a meeting scheduled with them for next week to present the report directly to them and see what questions they have, to discuss obviously our license application and just the town's ongoing role in monitoring, and also, of course, with the regional district, we're putting in requests to appear at the SCRD for a full presentation to them as well, and to really the need to sit down and go over how we're going to co-manage this asset going forward. I think our current approach is quite limited in how we're distributing our duties and responsibilities, but clearly we have an asset that's providing all of our communities a tremendous benefit and require us to work closer there. Should also say in terms of communications that Elizabeth has done a fair amount of work on that, and shortly after this meeting we'll place the report online, and the press release is going out as well, and I'm sure we will field a few questions and we'll have more information, because those are the types of things that we've been working on for the last little bit, and lots more to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I think there should be an opportunity to come back either, well, I think we're pretty booked between now and August. So I'm suggesting it'll be a fall activity, and maybe with a new council, a good activity to sit down with them and then sit down with the report and have a good conversation about it going forward. Thanks. Councillor Ludwig?
A really quick closing comment. I just really want to thank staff and the previous council and this council for continuing to prioritize the management of our aquifer. It's something that I think our community should be really proud of, and I think that our continued work on it is really impressive. It's very unusual, and so kudos to everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Simon, thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to further conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and yeah, have a great day.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to get some good news once in a while. So, okay, our next report. We're going to invite now the Director of Planning, and this is with regard to an amendment to the OCP and zoning bylaw for additions and alterations to historic Stonehurst home upgrades to English Park and construction 26 residential over park. So Director of Planning or planner, whoever push the button first.
Thank you. Kirsten's going to present this report.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So this is something that will be a little bit familiar to the members of the committee. The proposal to be discussed today was previously presented to the committee on March 30th at a special committee of the whole session. And it is for the comprehensive development of an upgraded English Park, alterations to the historic Stonehurst residence to introduce an inn and bistro, and the construction of 26 stratified residential units over 3 levels of underground parking. The purpose of the report was and remains to obtain recommendations from the committee to council on the requested official community plan and zoning bylaw amendments required to support the proposal. So familiar with the site, of course, at the corner of School Road and Gibsons Way, the lower corner of School Road and Gibsons Way. It involves 529 Gibsons Way, which is the Stonehurst property. And in yellow, the town-owned property without an address that is developed with 2 surface parking lots. So following the March 30th special committee of the whole session, council did pass a resolution for a workshop to be held with planning staff so that the project could be discussed in further detail. We did have this workshop recently on May 24th to discuss the considerations listed in the resolution. Additional topics discussed included a recounting of the proposal's history, description of the hierarchy of planning requirements that had informed the staff report recommendations, and a wider conversation on the community amenity contribution policy's applicability to the project. So as I mentioned, the purpose of the report is to receive direction on how to proceed with the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments, while a wider form and character discussion would be presented to the committee at a later date. So it's just those form and character guidelines related to the bulk and massing and those portions that can be controlled by zoning, as opposed to some of the more material or elements, siting and the such. So just a quick reminder of the proposal. Here's a rendering from the applicant from the corner of Gibsons Way and School Road, looking up at the property, seeing Stonehurst, theoretical design of an upgraded English park, and the residence behind. And this a general site plan showing the approximate orientation of each of those elements. Now, planning reviews are based on a hierarchy of the relevant planning documents, with each piece meant to give effect to the piece above it. So the official community plan at the top sets out the vision and policies for growth, while the zoning bylaws regulation implement those visions, and any development that is proposed or approved should comply with the rules within the zoning bylaw. Another way to look at it is that a development can't be approved if the proposed use is not permitted by the zoning bylaw regulations. And in that case, a zoning bylaw amendment, also known as a rezoning, would be required to allow such a use. So rezoning is a process that it would be involved in this procedure. And then similarly, if a rezoning were to be proposed, it can't be in conflict with the OCP land use designation for the property. So an OCP amendment would also be needed to remove that conflict before the rezoning could be adopted. So essentially, we have the zone, which has specific requirements for sites within that zone. We have general regulations within the zoning bylaw, which will supersede some of the requirements within the zone, such as how view protection will modify maximum building height or building setback, that sort of thing. And then above that, so the zoning bylaw gives effect to the official community plan in terms of the overall objectives and policies, land use designations, and also they're contained within their development permit areas. So that's for our form and character. So form and character for Gibson's Landing, for example, or for protection of the aquifer, as Simon was just describing in his presentation. So with this in mind, the proposal from the staff report, the land use designations are shown here in this map. The intent of the residential tourist accommodation designation can support both the residences and the inn. Well, the park and recreation, of course, is a good fit for Inglis Park. To quote table 5.1 from the OCP, residential tourist accommodation areas designated residential tourist accommodation were established to permit high density residential development or tourist accommodation such as hotel or inn, together with meeting and or food and beverage facilities customarily associated with such uses or some combination of these uses. So the high density residential that's referred to in that designation is then described as to permit multi-unit residential buildings, apartments and condominiums greater than 3 stories with a FSR, or floor space ratio, of 1.2 to a maximum of 1.4, generally 60 to 110 units per hectare. So the designation residential tourist accommodation currently is just on the Stonehurst site and will be expanded to cover a portion of the adjacent lot. Little bit more context on zoning bylaws before I describe the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. It is important to understand what a zoning bylaw can and cannot regulate. So it can regulate permitted uses, the maximum site area for uses, or minimum site area for uses, maximum residential density, and other bulk and massing controls, building height, lot coverage, setbacks, as well as parking spaces. But other types of items such as internal floor layouts, exterior materials and finishes, that would not be actually able to be controlled by regulation, and therefore would not be part of the zoning bylaw. Due to the use of the mix of uses involved with this proposal, staff did prepare a new comprehensive development area zone, which is specific to the site and incorporates all of those elements that a zoning bylaw can regulate. So that does have, as part of it, the zone, an appendix to the zoning bylaw, which would have the specific designs that would be approved as part of the bylaw. So similar distribution of the different zones as there were for the OCP designations. Parks, recreation, and open space zone would be applied to Inglis Park. While the new comprehensive development area 3 or CDA 3 zone would be proposed for Stonehurst and Inglis Park residences. As I mentioned, that will be comprised of the proposed development drawings as a schedule, not an appendix to the bylaw. And it is, the zone itself is designed to give effect to the residential tourist accommodation land use designation, including the stipulation from that designation that building height be taller than 3 stories. Sorry, I missed in the previous slide, but similar to what would have been for the OCP, the committee may either forward the amendment to council for first reading or not forward to first reading and list any recommended changes. So to go back a couple of slides, that was the same I had for the OCP land use. One of the other recommendations from the staff report was related to the community amenity contribution. To summarize some, but not all of the points of the CAC offer letter as presented in the earlier staff report, it includes the preservation of Stonehurst, upgrades in terms of the landscape design to Inglis Park, and 16 underground public parking spaces. So in terms of the community amenity contribution, it comes to council as to whether to accept the CAC offer, request further information related to the CAC offer, or to not accept the CAC offer or request changes to better reflect the needs. So given all of these 3 main categories, the official community plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment, and the community amenity contribution, the staff report includes on page 1 the following recommendations. So that the official community plan amendment and the zoning amendment be forwarded to council for first reading, that in accordance with Local Government Act requirements, the official community plan amendment is considered in conjunction with the town's financial plan. And then lastly, that council accepts the community amenity offer outlined in the letter prepared by Pacific Ray Development. So that just trying to keep it to a short presentation here, so we have time for questions. So thank you for listening, and we do have in the audience, I'm not sure if they've been moved over yet, but the applicant Rebecca Freshy and architect Fritz DeVries, if you have any questions for them.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And yes, I'm sure council will have some questions. And perhaps firstly, does council have any questions of Kirsten first before we move on to the architect or the proponent? No, okay. Babak, Jerry, good afternoon and welcome. And is there anything you'd like to expand on, and just in terms of the project or the proposed community amenities before we go to council for questions?
Sure. I mean, I can if you like, but if you have any questions, I can answer the questions as well. It's up to you.
Okay, all right. I think council has had a thorough opportunity to understand the project itself. I'm still kind of sitting on the fence about the sale of land versus actually thinking that lease of land would be much more palatable to me in a long-term lease in terms of the town being able to retain ownership for the long term, and that looking at that, but I know that probably hasn't been raised with you at this point in time, and something we can talk about. But I guess I have some concerns on the proposed amenities, and primarily it's calculation. I guess it's I think council would rather see an economic evaluation or calculation on the project itself to understand better what what is possible here. I don't agree with your assessment that the parking is part of a community amenity. That the parking is really just replacing parking that is being lost to the project, and so it's replacing the parking. I actually would be quite happy, from my own view, to retain the lower open parking space lot, so that we don't have to worry about putting that lot underground and digging further into the aquifer or digging further into the ground of that location, and so that we would still retain that parking lot, which when I look at the lines on the maps, that appears to be outside of the proposed area of sale or lease anyway, so that could stay as an open parking lot. And it's the upper parking lot then that we're talking about, the loss of capacity that we'd want to replace. Those are some of my thoughts. I know they're a little bit rambling, but I just don't consider that the parking to be an amenity. I consider it to be a status quo. We are losing parking. We are receiving parking, whether it's underground or open parking. It's important that it just be parking, and that's what people are looking at. So I will turn over to council though to see what other thoughts they have. Councillor Ludwig.
Yeah, I've really struggled with this proposal. There's things about this proposal that I really like, and then there's things about it that I'm struggling with. I think it's a beautifully designed project, and I love the fact that you guys have proposed to protect or preserve Stonehurst. I think those things are really weighing a positive for me. However, in retrospect and thinking more about this particular proposal, I realized that I feel that council missed a question when we went out to the community with our survey, the survey about whether or not the community wanted to sell the town land. In retrospect, I wish we had also asked the community, what's more important to you, the preservation of Stonehurst or the preservation of our view protection area? Because I realized in retrospect, I've been thinking all the way along that our hands, I don't want to say we're tied, but because of the land use designation in the OCP, requiring that this project be a 4-story, that we had to accept the height because it requires a 4-story. But that's only if we are preserving Stonehurst. If we don't preserve Stonehurst, you can do a 4-story step up on that property, theoretically. And so I'm just not so sure that the proposal as proposed is what the community wants. And I don't know. And that's why I'm really struggling. I want to preserve Stonehurst. I'm a big, I don't want to say history buff, but I really value history. And I think that preserving it is a huge benefit for the community. But I'm not so sure that it's worth the loss of the height that this particular development is proposing. And I do worry about the massing of it overshadowing Pioneer Park and that whole 5 Corners square. And so, so I'm really struggling with the height issue right now and the massing of it. It's not, I'm not necessarily one of these individuals that's against selling town land. I think town land, I think all town land should be used as best as we possibly can for the benefit of the community. I'm just not sure that this proposal as presented is what's best for that corner.
I would appreciate.
Go ahead, Vivek. Yeah.
I would appreciate if I could respond to some of those comments, because I think we
Yeah.
just lost if we just
Sure.
continue without a chance for me to respond. I'd like to just remind you that everything that has been done up to this point has been based on that first resolution that was passed by council to support the sale of the town land, which went through a public survey process. A lot has been done since then, and that has brought us to this point. And I'm just not sure how we're going back to that initial step that we all took, which, that initial step got us involved in so many steps that would have to be taken after that are costly and time consuming. And it's been over 2 years since then. And, since then we've gone through an appraisal process that was requested, and we went to a public survey process. It was suggested that we should have a public information meeting. So we put that together. It was an aquifer study that was required for the protection of the aquifer. So we had a third party, Geopacific, come in, and a reputable company, and they carried that out for the protection of the aquifer. It was a parking study that was required or was requested. So we had a third party again, Urban Systems, they took care of that. There was an arborist report that was required for the protection of the trees. So we had a professional arborist come in, and she, twice took care of that report to be submitted. So, a lot has been done since then.
And then we ask that of every developer. I know this is why I really struggled with this at this stage in the game.
Yeah.
I get it. And
and
when we put out that survey to the community, my hesitance right now is not about the sale of the land.
Right.
My hesitance right now is about the massing, and that's what I'm saying. I regret that we.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and like I said, a lot of these concerns we can address. If there are concerns with the height, and that's what council or the committee decides that that this is not the height that we want to go with, even though we did go through that whole 3D model and the bus stop, if you will, to show that views are not being compromised. But if that's the decision that's going to be taken, we can certainly address that concern, just like we have been trying to address every other concern that has been raised, like I've mentioned, through professionals that have come in with, and this is all, I appreciate. I hope you appreciate that, not without cost and time and effort. So that these processes have been taken, and and to be perfectly honest with you, and then to just make things clear. We're not, some big time developer with huge capital that stands to gain millions of dollars and coming in here. That's not the case. We're not motivated monetarily in entering this project. What we're motivated by is the potential to do something amazing here. And that's the reality of things. And I hope that that's recognized, because it's seldom that you come across a project with this size, this modest scale, and such a special place and a special location that has so many features and such an opportunity to add great value. We're talking about residential housing. We're talking about restoring and revitalizing a historic building that the community is attached to. We're talking about expansion of a park. We're talking about an inn, that much needed amenity in Lower Gibson. We're talking about a bistro. We're talking about underground parking structure. And when you mentioned that you don't agree with the parking being as part of the CAC, the parking, if the land is sold, that's with the parking on top of it. So I mean, we can't expect to sell the land and receive funds for the land, and then say, we want this. It's like selling a house with a house on it and saying, okay, give me the house too. It doesn't.
I agree, except that was our understanding, Babak. Our understanding was that, in fact, our understanding at the very first presentation that we received on this was 21 units, and I think it was 20 parking spaces underground. And that's what we looked at, and that's what we talked about. And then we said, yeah, in principle, we like that. And then suddenly it became 26 units the next time we saw it. And then it became, well, yeah, the parking's underground, but you're going to pay for it. And,
well, no, we're not paying for it, sir. I mean, Mayor.
You are in the context of the CAC, when you recalculate the CAC and you calculate that back at parking costs.
We're just saying that the number of parkings that are being, we're paying for the land, and we're also providing parking on the underground.
Yeah.
So the land is being transferred with the surface, right?
Yeah.
There's the surface is being used as parking, true, but then the land is being sold and we're receiving funds for it. So, and then we're also, constructing parking spaces underground and handing that over and for free, and as part of our CAC contribution. And that's not the only item on the CAC, and that's the only item that's quantifiable.
I guess I see that and say that the town will receive 725,000 plus Z number of parking spaces toward the personal land will count as part of the CAC offer and credit towards the development cost charges. So,
so the majority of the parking spaces, the good majority of the parking spaces, let's say the 16. I mean, right now we have the value of the parking space at $50,000, and that's not nearly the case. I mean, right now we have that the cost estimate by third party that's $85,000, just the cost of it, not the value. So if that's appraised, the value would be much higher. So the good majority of the parking spaces are offered as the CAC, but since we don't know what the final appraisal is going to look like, only a number of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them, we're proposing to be exchanged for a small portion of the land sale or the DCCs. That's it. It's not, then that's just for clarity and when it comes to project planning and financial planning for the project. So the good majority of them, and when we say that we run their pension up to 21 parking spaces, there are 15 parking spaces legally right now. But we're providing 16.
Yeah. And we could leave that lower lot as a parking lot.
Exactly, and that's I hope that you don't do that, because I would rather, because the town that part of town being beautiful with the park, it's just, I hope that's not the case, but aesthetically I think it's much more.
I don't agree with the parking assessment or the parking evaluation for the site, and 1.3 parking spaces per 2-bedroom unit. I don't know what that 0.3 looks like. And I don't know where you don't have a lot of visitor parking on that site, and you don't have a lot of parking for the bistro. So that it's going to be used for that public parking is going to be used also to support your activities and on the site. So
I disagree, Mayor, with all due respect. When you look at, any town metropolitan, you have parking spaces. You have to look at the people that are going to be, living there. They're not going to have 2 cars living in Lower Gibsons. They would bike around. They have, they have ample amount of bikes that are there. And, I believe Fritz can shed more light on that. What's happening elsewhere.
I unfortunately live about 2 blocks away with 3 cars. So, unfortunately, trying to resolve that. Yes.
Well, I appreciate that. That's why, like I said, we have it calls for 1.5, and that's why the parking study was done, right? The parking study was done, and that's what it's indicative of. That it's it's meeting their requirements and their criterias.
I'm going to go to Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And I just to Mayor Beamish's earlier comment about lease versus purchase, is this something that would be considered by you as a developer?
This is not something that I've ever thought about. And like I said, everything that has been done up to this point was based on resolution that was passed. And now, at least it just opens up a whole new way of looking at things. And, how would you even transfer those units to people, and whether or not it's just, it's something that it's the first time I'm hearing it. And, unfortunately, I can't even comment on it at this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Deandrad?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, as Councilor Ladwick said, I'm also struggling with this project, because when council received the first time, oh, are you open to sell the land? I mean, we got some loose image. You're trying to understand the benefits of the town. This is not a lot that we are judging only. This is town land. So to me, in order to sell, and I agree with Mayor Beamish on the point of selling, but even to consider selling, there has to be a tremendous value for the entire community. And that's where my struggle comes. First of all, if we look at the harbor plan, goal 1, objective 1, it says ensure new development is compatible in scale with existing development in the harbor area. Objective 1.2, ensure new development evokes a West Coast seaside village feel. This does not, to me, this does not evoke a seaside feel. I mean, this is a beautiful project for West Vancouver. I get it. It will be gorgeous there in a setup there, which is fully development. We have, in our vision, if you look at the OCP vision on council's strategic planning, this vision has been about, we will ensure that this beautiful town, it's not a city, beautiful town retains its seaside village character for the enjoyment of all. So that's my first struggle with this project, because I'm not questioning the beauty, but it does not evoke. It's the massive is huge. Then when you consider this project on the corner, on town land, then it's, we are in this in the street that is the heart of the harbor. And you have this huge massing, so there's no breathing space. I find it difficult. Another issue for me is the parking. Obviously, I understand from the point of the developer that building underground parking costs, but to me, from the point of view of the community, we are losing parking, and we are actually, the trade-offs are not really good, because we are losing surface parking to underground parking, which probably won't fit a lot of the trucks and cars, the big vehicles that park there. So I have an issue with that too. And considering that this has been considered a CAC, maybe another project will be okay, but for town land, to sell town land for this purpose, I don't think it's a good idea. And then my other concern goes with the traffic impact. I understand that has been done a parking study, but when I think about, there are 40 parking lots underground. Let's see that each person uses once a day, so there will be 80 in and out from the building. And then there's 16 underground parking for public parking. So let's see, in a busy summer day, there will be at least, let's see, for each spot, three cars. So we're talking about 6 in and out times 16. So in a given day, in a busy summer day, that could be close to 180 in and out of this location on the steep slope, close to a stoplight. I see this as a potential issue, especially people walking and relax. Not everybody drives well on the steep slope. So I have also not seen a traffic study of the impact of this, the 3 parking lots on this street. To me is a difficult too. And finally, obviously, I think the land evaluation, unfortunately, did not consider the land lift. So that's my issue. I think the project, if you see the independent project in another location, it's a nice project, but for the town lot, for a property, I don't see what the communities gain. Some taxes, we are not gonna get any affordable housing. Sorry, the Stonehurst is a good trade-off. But when I see, selling town land and losing parking, losing the seaside village character for the renovation of Stonehurst, I'm not sure that the community is interested. I'm not sure if this is a good trade-off.
Councillor Giandre, I appreciate those comments. I do, and if I may respond, I know that this time and last time you spoke a lot about added value, and I'm finding it difficult that that the value that's being added with this project is not being recognized, and it's quite frankly, it's discouraging, disappointing, disheartening. It really is, because it's with the considerable added value that this town will receive as a result of this. You talk about parking and traffic. Imagine these units built elsewhere in Gibsons. Their residences would have to drive to Lower Gibsonsville, where the main attraction and all the amenities are, look for parking and add to the traffic. By having them here with their own designated parking spaces, walking distance to all the amenities, you're in a sense reducing traffic and reducing the demand for parking. And you talk about the in and outs. I'm sure you've been downtown and you've seen these towers with $400, $500 some odd units. And how many times do you see these cars coming out of those towers? It's not what we think it. It's not how it seems. And that's why we have professional companies like Urban Systems carry those studies out to shed light on what the reality is when it comes to traffic and parking. But yeah, it's like I said, when it comes to height and over towering, there are certain things that I'm hearing that obviously, if that's the case, we can address those concerns. But if we're bringing up points that have been already dealt with, and that's why this whole thing got started with, that's where it hurts, because this was resolution that was passed 2 years ago. So we've been going at this for 2 years, and we've been pushing forward with this for 2 years because we believe that this is, there's great potential for great added value here. And I can go through them. Stonehurst is one, to open that historic landmark to the public and have it be accessible to the public, and then bringing an end to we don't have a hotel in Lower Gibsons, and there is a reason why there isn't. It's not some lucrative business to have that there, and with the near $3 million dollar value on it to revitalize Stonehurst and then open it up to the community for them to come and experience it and enjoy it. This is not something small to me, and I felt that it was important to all of us. And so you talk about the park, the expansion of the park, where the young and old can enjoy their time there, and making that the Five Corners that much more beautiful and inviting, and the vitality that these units will create there. Right now the units themselves, we have one of the best architects that this town has, this city has to offer, putting this design together for this project. This is not a small thing. You don't see that happening on a place like the Sunshine Coast. You don't. And we have done that, and we have brought Fritz de Vries architects to this town, and it is already having a domino effect. The next door 5 lots, the assembly of 5 lots, have retained him for their project. So this is already added value in motion. And to not recognize that, it's like I said, it is disheartening. It's just, yeah, it's.
Do we have a traffic? I understand we did the urban system did a parking study, but do we have a traffic study based on the amount of cars that would use this parking lot and how they would exit in this steep slope, and considering there is close to a stoplight?
There's a traffic study that was not done by us, but there's a traffic study that was done by the next door neighbors, and I'm sure that we can present that to you if that's necessary. And and I mean, we talk about added value again. I mean, just think about the how much of a support this will give to the local businesses during construction, after construction, operation. I mean, we're talking about added value. Why can't we talk about these things? We talk about yeah, I mean, I'm lost for words really here. It's tough.
Councilor Lumley?
Yeah, I feel like we're wasting these guys' time. That's like in the back of my mind. So I don't know. That's my only thought right now. I mean, we deferred to a workshop. We had a workshop. Now we're talking about land leases. It just seems, and parking, like, it just seems like over and over again. It's just like things just keep cropping up. I just feel like we're just wasting their time. I don't know if we should just keep talking about it because anyway, that's just my general feeling about this whole discussion is it's just, things keep getting added in by council, like constantly, like, he's put a proposal together. We've met on it twice. This is the third time. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how many times are we going to keep meeting on it, or does he have to change his whole approach? Right. I mean, some people can, like, personally, I mean, I hope no one takes this, doesn't get offended or anything, but especially the proponent. But I mean, I'm just not a huge, like, it's, there's going to be some people that hate me for this, but I mean, preserving Stonehouse as a community amenity, this just doesn't resonate with me at all. So, if the proponent would be better off going in another direction, maybe that's what he should do. But I mean, finding ways of coming up with height variances and so on and so forth. I just think it's a tall order. Like, couldn't he just start at the base of he could do 4 stories with more units if he just started at the base of Gibsons Way, or the other one would be build a hotel there. Like, it's zoned, that's, I mean, how many people countlessly talked about that's where the George should be, So I don't know. It just seems like we're going in circles. That's all.
Councilor Andrade?
Yeah, I appreciate what Councilor Lumley is saying. I think there are 2 things here, at least. I think there's the sale of the town land and what could be built in town land, and we also a corner lot. And then there's the project, the zoning of the other project. And I think some of the issues, at least that I'm bringing, some have to do with the full project. For example, the traffic, right? The impact, because there will be, the parking lot. But with regard to, sorry, what's the point I was going to make? Sorry. Well, with regard to the fact that I think one of the issue is also the fact that the town lot, I think what is being proposed on a town lot, so that's what I'm saying. So perhaps if we were judging the project on your property already, I think it's a different approach. And I think that's what we were also struggling, because first, your lot is not at the corner, so the impact of the mass, it's slightly different, right? Yeah. The problem with the town lot, it is right at the street, right at the corner, so everything increases, right? Because it's more exposed. And the second thing, because it's town land, you have to look at the value of for the community. And
yeah, and I'm sorry, but that's exactly what we're talking about, the benefits to the community. I mean, Councillor Lumley is mentioning that he doesn't consider Stonehurst as an amenity. When in your own current policy, heritage conservation is listed as a CAC. And do you know of any other historic or heritage building on the coast that's more important to the community than this one? And how do we not consider that a CAC? You know, spending $3 million to conserve it is not a CAC. You know, like I said, a lot of these comments that are being made, like I said, we can address them when it comes to the height, when it comes to the number of units or parking spaces, or if we're saying we don't want that to be a park, we'd rather have it as above surface parking spaces. This is, I mean, you talked about a steep slope on School Road. We have a solution for that. We can have a access from Gibsons Way that leads right to the center parking. So these things can be addressed. The ones that are things like that take us to the beginning of town land being, we are past that. And that's why we've been at it for 2 years. Cost, effort, time. Yeah.
Councilor Kroll.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And I realize from a development point of view, this is frustrating for you. Just in to recap some of the comments that have been made, when we went out to the community to see for consideration of the sale of town land, since what we went out with was one thing and the project has changed. Now, you've admitted yourself that potentially some of these things that have changed, like number of units and one thing and another, could be addressed. Obviously, in your business study for this project, you need a certain number of units that you can sell for it to be economically viable. Just between the last meeting we had with you and this meeting, the renovation cost of Stonehurst has gone up almost $1 million from what you quoted in the original presentation. You refer to people are going to walk to the local amenities. There's no bank, there's no grocery store, there's no doctor, there's no liquor store in the lower village. There's a beer and wine store, but if people are probably that can afford to live in those units are probably going to be buying wine by the case, so they're not going to be buying it at the Marine Beer and Wine store. So they are going to be getting in their cars. What I did hear, which is really encouraging in all of this, that Jerry has been consulted with respect to the development on the other properties. Because that was one of my biggest concerns, is what your property was going to look like relative to what happens next to it. With keeping of, the general look of, quote, seaside character, which is a bit of a moving target. There's a bit of angst. I think we're all in agreement there. I would certainly, suggest that there is going to be, if we pass, reading of this, it's going to come to a public hearing. I would like to just, if I may, inquire of Jerry towards the look of the projects as they come together. And are there some areas of commonality between your project and the adjacent property that might possibly address some of these issues, like parking and access to a steep road?
Can I respond for a minute, if I may?
Yeah, go ahead. Ben.
Just to respond, I didn't increase the number by $1 million. I said $2.6 million the last time for preservation of Stonehurst, and I'm just saying 3 million because we're obviously rounding it up. And when it comes to a renovation project, you don't know what you're getting when you get in there. And we have comparables to show that there's a high cost, a high risk when it comes to a renovation type project of this sort, especially when you're dealing with a historic building. And that 2.6 million was not inclusive of the interior fit out furnishing. So I mean, there are added costs that could come with it. When it comes to the parking that you mentioned, that yeah, I'm fully aware of the fact that there are not, all the amenities are not there. But what I'm not suggesting that that people will not get in their cars. I'm talking about the traffic that could be reduced and the parking demand reduced in Lower Gibsons as a result of these units, these being where they are, with them being walking distance to all the amenities. So the reduction in traffic and the reduction for demand in parking is still there. Sure, they may need to get in their car and drive elsewhere. That's not increasing traffic in Lower Gibsons or increasing demand for parking in Lower Gibsons. That's what I was pointing out when I mentioned that, by them being here as opposed to elsewhere, the main attraction, the restaurants and everything are in Lower Gibsons. So if they were built elsewhere, they would have to drive to Lower Gibsons and then look for parking and add to the traffic. But they're right there with their own designated parking spaces, so they're close to all the amenities. They would just walk anywhere they want in Lower Gibsons, reducing the traffic and reducing the demand for parking. Thank you.
Councilor Andrade.
Thank you. This is a question for the developer. I understand that the preliminary studies with regard to aquifer shows that the 3 underground level parking is possible, but obviously there is a risk. So let's see, there's a risk that only a 2-level parking can be built. Would the project still be viable? Would you still build if they come and say, sorry, we cannot dig 3-level underground?
Ma'am, Councilor Jandre, the parking, there are no 2-level parking spaces. There are only 1-level parking spaces. The school road is on a slope with 3 separate entrances to every one of these parking spaces. So,
only 1, okay.
So we're not, by eliminating one, we're not, and the study was done, they overestimated. When we said we're going to go down, so many such a depth, they go further than that, and the boreholes and the sonic drilling that was done, they go much deeper than that to make sure that it's that everything is safe and sound when it comes to the protection of the aquifer. We take that very seriously. I'm a civil engineer myself. I'm not, I'm by trade, by education, so I don't take these kinds of things lightly. So rest assured that we're doing things in a professional way, and we're not cutting corners, or it's everything is being done.
No, I have no doubt about that. I was contemplating in case something is not possible, if the project was still viable because there's a loss of 1 level or something like that.
Right. I'm sorry. Could you? Was there a question?
I was saying if by any chance, due to the substrate, I know the prospects, the preliminary studies are positive. So it seems that everything would be possible, but there's always the risk, and they talk about it. So if perhaps 1 level cannot be dig down, if just 2-level parking would be sufficient my understanding is that would impact the number of units. So your project would have to have less units if there's something happens in this regard. So my question is, would the project still be viable?
Like I said, we would have to go and take a look at that again and see what we can do. If it means, reducing the number of units, obviously when you reduce the number of units, you're also reducing, the buildable area. So, you could still have a feasible project depending on how you do it, and which units you take off and what needs to be done. But what I'm asking is that we need to come to an understanding to see what the concerns are, so we can address them accordingly. But yeah, to answer your question in full, it's possible. We just have to go and look at it and see what those concerns are, and so we can address them.
Okay. From my point of view, I think not only my my personal point of view, I heard a lot from the community. It's the massing and the seaside village character that go together, right? Because it looks like more a big town, a big city.
We have a recent rendering of the project, and I wish I could show that to you, because it looks beautiful, and it's I know it's maybe subjective, but I wish I could send that off and show it to you. But yeah, if the overtowering, if that's a real concern, there are options that we have that we can take a look at. And when we've gone over it with Fritz's office, and we can certainly take a look at that and consider different options, if that's really the way that we want to move forward with things. But Yeah, so it's certainly possible, yes.
To the Director of Planning, at this stage, we cannot go through with the rezoning until we have, or the OCP until we have agreement on the CAC. Is that correct?
The CAC is part of the process, but it's a side negotiation. You've got to be okay with the land use that's being proposed.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the sale of land, that was a decision that was made already. So, and it was subject to rezoning. So if the rezoning gets rejected, then the resolution to sell the land gets rejected as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the architect has his hand up. Fritz has his hand up and Mike.
Sorry. Yeah, Jerry, go ahead. No.
Yeah, maybe to clarify, we actually had to switch sides. So I'm sitting in Jerry's spot at the moment. so it's actually Fritz who's the architect, right? So just to clarify that. Yeah, there's a few things. Like, first of all, I want to say one thing about the parking. Your parking bylaw actually requires a lot of stalls per unit. It's unusually high. And I give you an example. I don't know one place that asks 1.5 stalls for a 1-bedroom unit, just as an example. The 1.5 for 2 bedrooms is more common. 1.5 for 1 bedroom is very unusual, right? So in effect, it's an example that you are high in your parking requirements, and we can actually meet them. We haven't even addressed yet the idea to put some shared stalls in, which is kind of very common. That's in your bylaw, and that reduces the parking need. So for instance, if you have one shared stall that counts for 3 parking stalls, if that's well managed, so parking can certainly be addressed. I find the access to School Road, it's as Babak was saying, is that this would not be for normal use if the school road is safe, but if it would be very icy, then yes, there can be a secondary exit, basically using the driveway from Stonehurst itself, and it would be regraded to some degree. But also what I kind of think is that there's 2 existing lots that have a fairly high turnover because it's for visitors. People go in and out there. Those lots are not designed by a civil engineer to get the best grades and the safest access. These ones will be. So I don't think the safety concern, I don't think that's really there, but we can definitely try to make it as safe as possible for its slippery conditions. I want to give one example about a little heritage building that is at the moment being renovated. And you may know this little building because it's the very building that the municipality of West Vancouver has decided to renovate. It's owned by West Vancouver. It's the little art gallery at the bottom of, what is it, 14th? That in the budget approved by West Vancouver Council, it sits at $3 million. And I said to Babak, your cost estimate from 2.7 that came from the Altos, and that in a sense is low because the amount of facilities. Think about the fire ratings, think about the bathrooms, think about everything that you have to put into a small inn is actually a very high cost. So I don't think the 3 million or the 2.7 is a high number. If any, I believe he will go over. The other thing I want to say is a little bit about overshadowing, because as an architect, I agree with that. It is higher than I would like it to be. If it would all be 3 stories, that would definitely be easier. There's no question about it. And we originally started with the model at 3 stories, and then it became clear that there's huge expenses. And Babak Professor asked us to increase the square footage and to increase the unit count, and that's the result. As an architect, you don't necessarily prefer that because it's easier to work at a smaller scale. We did some more studies for views and for impact of overshadowing. And agree with what councillors and mayors are saying, that the overshadowing the size of the project, it would definitely be nicer if it's lower as seen from the, let's say, the Five Corners or from the Wharf or from Marine Drive, all those different locations. It's true, it would definitely be nice if that's lower. I think that what Babak has said in this meeting, that we've looked at different things and that, you know, balancing the cost of the parking structures, the number of units, and how it affects your support of the project and how well it will suit Gibsons. I think that's the next step, but we haven't heard back from you. You know, that's the problem. I've contacted Babak a number of times and said, well, can we do the next step? Can we move forward? But it has been from no, we're just waiting. We want to know what the response from Gibsons is. They have to take some time themselves to make up their mind. Well, here it is, right? And so then in my mind, the next logical step is just to do exactly what you're asking for, is to see, can we come back with a proposal that first of all addresses the overshadowing, the forming character. And we actually think that the views over the buildings are far less an issue than looking up, you know? And I think all of you said that, and, you know, we agree. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to actually provide, you know, what is of benefit to the town. And in my mind, it's just the next step. So we need some more time, you know? And I maybe thank you for saying that it's a beautiful project, because that, as an architect, is quite flattering. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your comments.
Also, maybe Mayor, your last comment at the March meeting, I appreciate that as well. You actually said, or you as a councillor said, that you would like to work with our firm and with the developer to come to a successful project. And I think that's what we all want to do.
Yeah.
And just let us do that. You know, we've listened to you and we want to bring it closer to what satisfies your needs.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to go to the corporate officer, then the director of planning. Got a hands up.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. This is just a quick reminder that we are due to go in council in 5 minutes, actually just slightly less than 5 minutes now. And we have guests attending for that in-camera session. Okay. Just a gentle reminder.
I appreciate that. And in that regard too, I can suggest that we will probably defer the last two reports on this agenda as well. And Director of Planning?
Thank you, Mayor. So I think my comments are just about process here. The developers need some direction on how this is going to proceed. So you could move, if you want to move forward with a different proposal, they would need some guidance on how to change it. So if it's come back with a smaller massing and smaller scale, you could say something like that. You can move to first reading of the OCP amendment with this basically extending the land use designation. You don't need to accept the CAC offer in this moment. That should be accepted before it goes to public hearing, because after the public hearing, we don't want any new information coming out after that. So I guess my advice to council at this point is to provide some kind of direction so that the developers know which direction to go in and how to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I certainly am not generally opposed to the project. I do think we're going to need to look more closely at the CACs and talk about those. I think that and that's something we can negotiate and give direction to staff on. I think I give you the encouragement, if council wants to move to first reading of the OCP and the zoning, and get it on the table and get it started, I'm okay with that. But I would say we're probably not finished at that point. So, Councillor Crowell.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. And I appreciate what we heard from the office of Fritz de Vries, because I think a lot of what he had to say is very valuable. And obviously he expressed that there is some room to maneuver here. So what I would like to move the motions as proposed by staff and add an and that the developers and the architect work with staff to address some of the concerns that have been brought before us. But I think, the tone is going to grow. We don't always have and it's I think we've all expressed it's an interesting project, perhaps a little bigger than what we initially anticipated, but I think there is room to work with staff and the developer and the architect, and what I would like to see, particularly in light of the Fritz de Vries architects are working with the other thing, if there is any suggestion of the harmony between the projects, that it looks more something as a thought out project than a patchwork quilt. So I would move the recommendations. Well, I guess there's an amendment, and that the developer works with staff to address some of the concerns. But other than that, I would move the recommendations as
Are you
proposed.
moving the recommendation on the CAC, Councillor Kroll?
Yes, sir. Oh, well, no, the CAC, I guess that one would need to be pulled at this point for further discussion.
Okay, so you'll move the first reading of the OCP amendment bylaw number 98529.
Correct.
And then to be forwarded to council for first reading, and also the zoning amendment 1065 65, and the corresponding resolutions that go with that.
Right.
The previous one pursuant to section 477.
Yeah, and adding an and that the developers work with the developer and architect work with staff to see if some common ground can be found with the concerns that have been raised by council.
Okay. Leslie Ann?
Planning.
Could council or this committee just specify what those common concerns are? So I heard massing and height, but I just want to make sure we get the clear direction so that they can do what you're asking for.
Well, I think the massing and height is relative to the number of units that they're trying to incorporate into the project. So slightly reducing the number of units might help with that. Might help with the massing and the height, and also change the stepping of the project. Councillor,
I think we talk about seaside village character. We had a project here that was passed unanimously because you just follow the seaside village character, and I think this is really important. The harbor plan has a lot of examples. The OCP has a lot of examples. I think this is very important for the community. And I would like to see also a traffic study, because I'm concerned. This is a difficult street. So I don't know if the traffic study that was done by the neighbor, I have no idea how many vehicles they had. I have no idea, but it should address what's going to happen with this parking lot, the tree, the tree parking lots.
Councillor Lemley?
Yeah, I'm gonna second the motion.
Thank you.
I think if our seaside community had like strains of this vein by it, it'd be a beautiful community. I love the project. As far as the massing goes, I just had a question for Fritz. Is there ways you can just kind of like, I'm not an architect, and I don't pretend to be one, but could you remodel some of it? If you guys go on their website, right, Pacific Ray, I mean, it looks gorgeous, but the park looks, if there's some way you could somehow take some of the massing away and drop it down and create a different level of park. I don't know, because on your site, it looks like Stonehurst and a block of buildings. I think it's like what Councillor Cole said, patchwork quilt, but I am going to second the motion. And that would be one of my concerns. The CICs can wait, but that would be one of my concerns. But I like the project. I I like it. So anyway.
Councillor Ludwig?
Again, just want to reiterate my massing concern. I'm looking right now at the cross-section diagram in your report. It's called Attachment A, page 13 of 19. And from the main floor of Stonehurst, and this is all your project, from the main floor of Stonehurst to the top floor of the back building, it's 6 stories. So again, I'm finding it hard to believe that this project can't come down quite a bit according to our land use designation. It may not be financially feasible, but I just wanted to point that out, that right now from top to bottom of your land is 6 stories as you've presented it here. And so that's what I'm struggling with. So for that reason, I won't be voting in favor of taking it to first reading, because I don't want to set up your guys' expectations and have you work. I know you've done tons of work. I totally respect that. You've just spent a ton of money, and I feel terribly for you guys. I get this. This is a very frustrating process, but I just wanted you to understand what I'm seeing when I look at that massing perspective. Okay.
So it has been moved and seconded. And do you have enough notes, Leslie Ann, and comments right now?
I think I do. I've added here, and that prior to second reading, staff work with the developer to reduce the height and massing, and that just so that there's a time frame with these, and that prior to second reading, a traffic impact study be received.
And I am not opposed to open parking. That one parking lot remaining is open parking, because we get a lot of RVs, we get a lot of campers looking for parking spaces, and we see that on that site. And we don't have parking in Lower Gibsons. I mean, we are going to have to probably go to some kind of a pay parking system at some time, simply because we don't have a lot of parking, and every project is impacting that we have coming along. So I'm going to call the question right now on the motions, and look forward to further conversation. All in favor of the motions as presented by Councillor Crowell? Opposed? Okay. Do you want that recorded, Councillor Ludwig?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And Babak, you're seeing a reflection from council here. I mean, I appreciate that 2 years ago we saw something. It wasn't this. We didn't see this project 2 years ago. We saw a different project. And now you're getting a reflection of council. When this goes to zoning and public inquiry, public hearing, you're going to hear from the community. And so the questions that we ask and bring forward at this point in time are questions that I'm very confident you're going to hear at the public hearing. So addressing them now as opposed to addressing them then gives a chance for the project to actually be successful. Councillor Crowell?
Thank you, Mayor Beamer. Just something very brief. The information session that was held with respect to this project, I don't know, there seemed to be very short notice lead up to it. And something I will mention is that council was criticized in the community for not attending it. And it wasn't that we wouldn't have attended it, we didn't know about it. So if you're doing any further information sessions or any other community engagement, please, so we can work with you, include us in the invitation to an event, and don't have it on a Tuesday, please.
Okay, Councillor Ludwig, go ahead.
And I just want to say, it's not that I'm not still interested in working with you guys. And it's not that I'm not still interested in seeing this proposal if it comes again. I just I don't want to be setting up your expectations. I wanted to be clear what I'm struggling with from a massing perspective. And we're 2 stories out between you and me. And so I just wanted you to be clear about that. I don't know what you'll come back with, but I just wanted you to understand. That's where I'm struggling somewhere in there.
Can I just say that I appreciate all your comments, and we definitely do take them all very seriously, and we will consider all of them and then try to come back with something that's acceptable. And thank you.
Leanne?
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't get any direction in a resolution or a recommendation to council for the CAC. Is there something you want to say about that?
We should have to further conversation with that. I'm concerned with the value and the inclusion of parking and the CAC calculation and things like that. So that's my concern. But I think we can have a separate conversation on that because that's a negotiation. So, okay. Council, I'm going to need a resolution to defer items 4.2 and 4.3 to our next meeting, our next committee of the whole. Councillor Kroll, thank you. Councillor Ladwig, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And I say goodbye to you, gentlemen, and thank you very much for being with us. We are going to go in camera this time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Kroll.
Just with apologies to staff, because this is the second time this has happened where staff have gone to great lengths to prepare reports. And because we've got these just overwhelming agendas, you know, I just feel really badly for staff. It's, you know, they've got better things to be doing than generating reports that keep getting knocked off the table. So
don't have to apologize to them. We go back to 2 years ago with strategic planning. We said, we don't need quarterly reports. And staff said, oh, we want them. So, okay, so we're still getting them, and that's great. And we will just read them. Make sure you read them. And if you have any questions, direct your questions to staff. You don't have to be in a meeting to ask a question of staff from a quarterly report. So
they were just great reports, and I'm, you know,
please do that. Thank you. We'll get to them. Councilor, we have people waiting. Go ahead, Councilor.
Mayor, I just want to reiterate, because I do appreciate actually staff reports. These reports in particular were amazing. Okay. It was done really detailed, and perhaps we should bring next meeting. And
that's what we just
go over quickly.
We have deferred them to the next meeting. Yes, we've done that.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Amber.
I need a motion to close.
Can you hang on a second?
Motion to close the meeting, Councillor Lumley, Councillor Ladwig, and this is in accordance with section 92B of the Community Charter, consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between a municipality and a provincial government or federal government or both, between a provincial government or federal government or both, and a third party. So that all in favor of motion to close? Thank you very much. We are going to close, and we'll leave that to the corporate officer to shut it down. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Beamish. I'll be moving over our guests first.
Thank you. I hope you guys brought supper.
We've been joined by Pam Ryan, and Amanda Price should be joining you now. And if everyone else could please exit the meeting. If not, I'll just remove you.
You've been warned.
Amanda and Pam, thank you and welcome. We can see you on our screen.
Thank you.
Wait for Councillor Kroll and Councillor D'Andrade and Councillor Ladwig to return. Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
Okay. And one more councillor to come.
I think we have Gabriel Lord joining you as well.
That's correct.
So Pam, Amanda, Gabriel Lord, is that all of you?
We do have our technical consultant, Amrita Banerjee, if she is there. I know she had some trouble logging in earlier.
I might have accidentally removed her. Can you please ask her to join again, and I will wait to close the meeting until she's here.
Sure, thank you. I'll let her know right now.
My apologies. I didn't recognize the name. There she is. Thank you. Okay, I believe we're all here. I'm going
Councilor
to-
Diandrade is now with us. Oh, is Councilor Diandrade with us now? Oh, there we are.